I'm from a small town. It's the kind of town where you're in the same class with the same kids from preschool through graduation. I was never really popular. I had my fair share of bullies, but never as bad as one kid in my class, Max. He was on the shorter side and had these little round glasses with his hair slicked to the side. Max looked like he was right out of a movie, cast as a stereotypical nerd. He kept to himself and didn't really interact with others if he could avoid it. It was the 8th grade when Max and I were paired as lab partners and had to sit at the same table together every day for the entire year. I considered myself a nice person and always went out of my way to make sure I wasn't rude to people, especially people who hadn't done anything to deserve it. So of course I was friendly and happy to be his partner as long as he did his fair share of the work. The year came and went. He was shy but polite, and we got along fine being partners. 9th grade started, and I had a lot of troubles at home with my birth father, so I chose to move in with my mother a few towns over. I was only about 30 minutes away, but I had to start a completely new school a month into my freshman year, and it was scary. I may not have been popular at my last school, but I did have several friends whom I loved and missed dearly. My mom would often drive me to the other town to see my friends and hang out, and I also started making new friends at my new school. It was a good setup, and I continued this way until I was 16 and could drive myself. I never heard anything from Max, and honestly, I had kind of forgotten about him. That was until my junior year of high school. I started casually seeing this other guy, Jack, from my hometown, and he asked me to go with him to prom. I was excited and happy to say yes, as I was get to spend the night with him and my friends from childhood. A couple of months before prom, my mother told me there was a new lady at her job, and she was asking about me because her grandson was seeing me, and she wanted a picture so that she could put a face to my name. My mother knew Jack and knew this wasn't his grandmother, so she asked his name, and wouldn't you know it, it was Max. My mother showed her a picture of me that she had on her desk, and the lady went on her way. A few weeks later, she asked for the color of my prom dress so that she knew what to get Max so that we matched. My mother was confused, but told her it was pink. About 2 weeks before prom, some of my friends from my hometown told me that Max had been telling some people that we were going to the dance together, and that he was so excited. I thought this was creepy, but I didn't put too much thought into it. The night of prom, I picked Jack up, and we headed over to the school, only to find Max and his grandmother waiting outside the entrance, so that she could take pictures of us before we went in. I was not one to disappoint people, so I politely took a couple of pictures with him, as my actual date stood off to the side and waited. If Max's grandmother was confused that I had another date, she didn't show it. The rest of the night went smoothly, and Jack and I had a great time. We didn't see Max anymore, and we assumed he had left. Other than his grandmother telling my mom that he lost my number and trying to get it for him, which she thankfully didn't do, I didn't hear much from him until we graduated. I decided to go to a state college, and I'd heard that Max had gotten into a well-respected private university. Everything was fine for the first few weeks of college, but then I ran into him. He caught me on the way to class one day. I was polite and asked if he was a student here too, which he replied he was, and I chatted with him for a minute before hurrying off to class. It was a relatively harmless interaction. It still creeped me out a bit since I knew he had gotten into that other school, and wondered why he chose to go to a state college when he had a better opportunity somewhere else. For the next few months, I would run into him almost daily. He always wanted to talk and never seemed to be with anyone else. I found out from some girls in my dorm that he had been hanging around asking about me and trying to figure out my class schedule so he'd know where I would be and when. He also told them that he was my boyfriend, and he passed up a scholarship to another college to come here and be with me instead. They figured out he was lying when they never saw us together for long periods of time, that he was never up in the dorms with me. They stopped answering his questions. I left at the end of the semester to move home and take classes at a nearby school. I did not tell him, obviously. The following year, I got married to my boyfriend from my senior year of high school. My husband is from a small town in my home county. We decided to visit his hometown for a fair shortly after the wedding. While walking around and enjoying ourselves, I saw Max staring at us from the end of the block. He was standing there, staring at me. His face was a look of pure hatred, and I knew I would be in danger if my husband wasn't close by. He looked like a murderer, staring down his prey, which was me. I tried to ignore him and go about my night while sticking close to my husband. I saw him a few more times while at the fair. He was always slightly hidden, but that evil stare never left his face as he watched me. I was never happier that night than when we left. The next few years passed with me hearing nothing from him at all. I didn't even know if Max still lived around the area or not. I found out a little while after that he did when I started working at a clothing store in town. He would stop in and sit in that dad chair next to the door for all the guys to hang out while the women shopped. I mentioned it to my manager because of our history and the fact that he would stare at me constantly while sitting there, but he always came in with a girl. I later found out it was his sister, so I didn't think too much of it. He never spoke to me. He just stared. When I was in my mid-20s, I moved to a city in my home state, but still several hours away from my small town. I'm 30 now and doing well in life. Other than a random Facebook friend request, which I rejected, I haven't heard from him. I hope that it stays that way.